My name is Krista, and at 32 years old, I never expected to be homeless on Christmas night. After serving 10 years in the Army and sending almost every paycheck home, I thought my family would welcome me with open arms when I returned. Injured instead. My mother looked me in the eyes over Christmas dinner and said words that cut deeper than any combat wound. "You're a burden, get out of this house." With nowhere else to go, I took a late-night bus to my grandmother's farm, not knowing that when she opened her door, the 5 words she spoke would shatter what little was left of my heart. As I share my journey from rejection to redemption, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your location in the comments and subscribe if stories of resilience speak to your heart. Growing up with Diane as a mother was like walking on eggshells that had been scattered across a minefield. From my earliest memories, her love always came with conditions. "I bought you new shoes, so you better get straight as this semester, or after all I do for you. The least you could do is clean the entire house." Nothing was ever freely given. Everything was a transaction. My father left when I was 5. I have vague memories of a tall man with a kind smile who would read me bedtime stories, but those memories faded with time. After he was gone, Mom would often remind me how much I looked like him, and not in a good way. "You have a stubborn chin," she would say with disdain, "always thinking you know better than everyone else." The only consistent love in my childhood came from my grandmother, Eleanor, my mother's mother. Grandma's farm was my sanctuary, a place where I could breathe freely and just be a kid. During summer breaks, I would spend weeks at her sprawling property in rural Pennsylvania, helping with the chickens, learning to bake apple pies, and sitting on the porch swing as she told me stories about her own childhood. "You know, Krista," she would say as we shelled peas together, "you have a spirit that cannot be broken." Remember that when the world feels heavy. I clung to those words through middle school, high school, as my mother's behavior became increasingly erratic. Some days she would be almost loving, bringing home my favorite ice cream or asking about my day. Those glimpses of maternal warmth were enough to keep me hoping that someday she would change, that someday it would be enough for her to love unconditionally. My siblings learned to play her game better than I ever could. Tyler, 2 years younger than me, became the perfect chameleon, adjusting his personality to whatever would please Mom in the moment. Vanessa, the youngest at 4 years my junior, mastered the art of flattery from an early age. "Mom, you look like you could be my sister," she would say, and Diane would beam with pride. Meanwhile, I remained the stubborn one, the difficult one, the one who asked too many questions and had too many needs. By 18, I knew I needed to escape. The military seemed like the perfect solution. A way out of the house, a chance to serve a purpose greater than myself. And surprisingly, a way to finally earn my mother's approval. The day I told her I had enlisted, I saw something in her eyes I had rarely seen before: respect. "The military will be good for you," she said. "Teach you some discipline." What she didn't say, but what became clear in the following months, was that my enlistment also presented a financial opportunity. As I prepared to leave for basic training, she casually mentioned how tight money had been, how hard it was raising 3 children on her own, how the house needed a new roof. I made my first promise to send money home. While still at the recruitment office, the recruiter had just finished explaining my salary structure when I mentally began allocating a portion for my mother and siblings. It seemed like the right thing to do. After all, family supports family, right? Basic training was brutal, but clarifying for the first time in my life. The rules made sense: work hard, follow orders, support your team, and you'll succeed. The arbitrary nature of my mother's approval was replaced by the straightforward expectations of my drill sergeants. I thrived in that environment, graduating at the top of my class. During my first deployment, I set up an automatic transfer to send $500 home each month. It was a significant portion of my salary, but I lived on base with most expenses covered. The few times I called home, my mother actually sounded happy to hear from me. "Everyone at church is so proud," she told me once I showed them your photos in uniform. My daughter serving her country. Those words sustained me through long nights in foreign lands, through the fear and the loneliness. My mother was proud of me. Finally, I had done something right. As the years passed, her financial requests increased. The roof turned into a bathroom remodel. Then Vanessa needed a car for college. Then Tyler lost his job and moved back home. Each time I increased the amount I sent, often taking extra shifts or dangerous assignments that came with hazard pay. When I did get leave to visit home, the warmth I heard in our phone calls rarely materialized in person. Mom would have a list of home repairs waiting for me or social obligations that kept her busy during my brief stays. Still, there were moments of birthday cake with my favorite frosting, a scrapbook of newspaper clippings about military achievement that might have included my unit, a quick hug as I headed back to the airport. I clung to those moments like precious gems, evidence that beneath it all, my mother did love me. I just needed to try harder, give more, be better. Then she would finally show me the unconditional love I craved. My grandmother saw through it all. During my visits to her farm, which I always prioritized, despite my mother's complaints, Eleanor would gently try to open my eyes. "Krista, love should not be this hard," she would say as we walked through her orchard. "You cannot buy someone's affection, and if you could, it would not be worth having." But I wasn't ready to hear her wisdom. The pattern was set. I would serve, I would send money, and someday it would be enough. Someday I would come home to the loving family I had always wanted. That dream kept me going through 10 years of service, through 3 deployments, through watching friends fall in combat and attending their funerals. Through it all, I held on to the belief that I was not just serving my country, but also securing my place in my family's heart. How wrong I was. My final deployment was supposed to be a routine peacekeeping mission. Our unit had been sent to provide security for a humanitarian aid distribution in a region that had seen conflict, but was considered relatively stable. I had been on dozens of similar missions before, and had developed a sixth sense for trouble. That day, everything felt normal as we escorted the aid trucks into the small village. I remember joking with Santos, one of the newer members of our unit, as we scanned the crowds. "Keep your eyes open, but your finger off the trigger." I told him these are mostly just families trying to get food. The explosion came without warning. Later they would tell me it was an IED buried in the road weeks earlier, likely forgotten until our convoy triggered it. I remember a flash of light, a deafening sound, and then the sensation of flying through the air. When I landed, I couldn't feel my legs, and the screaming I heard seemed distant, as if coming from another world. I learned much later that Santos had been killed instantly. 3 other members of my unit suffered serious injuries. As for me, the explosion had sent shrapnel, tearing through my right leg and lower back, damaging nerves and shattering my femur. When I woke up in the field hospital, the first thing the doctor told me was that I was lucky to be alive. The second thing he said was that my military career was over. The next 3 months were a blur of surgeries, pain medications, and physical therapy. I had to learn to walk again with the help of a cane and leg brace. The nerve damage meant constant pain that even the strongest medications could only dull. But the physical pain was nothing compared to the emotional trauma of losing Santos, of having my career abruptly ended, of facing a future I had never planned for. During those months of recovery, my mother called more frequently than she ever had before. Her voice took on a nurturing tone I barely recognized. "We're getting your old room ready," she said in one call. "Tyler moved out again, so you'll have the whole space to yourself. The church group is organizing meals," she mentioned in another. "Everyone wants to help our wounded warrior." The attention was disorienting, but welcome. Perhaps this was the silver lining to my injury, finally proving to my mother that I deserved her care. I began to envision a homecoming, filled with the love and support I had always craved. In my hospital bed, I daydreamed about family dinners where I would be the guest of honor, about my mother tenderly helping me with my physical therapy exercises, about finally being part of a family unit that functioned with love rather than obligation. As my discharge date approached, I made plans to return home just before Christmas. "It will be perfect," my mother said when I called to confirm the dates. "The whole family will be together for the holidays." A real celebration. The journey home was arduous. The military had arranged for medical transport to the major airport, but from there I was on my own. Each step with my cane sent shooting pain through my leg, and navigating the crowded holiday terminals was exhausting. Still, I pushed through, fueled by the anticipation of the welcome that awaited me. As the plane began its descent into Pittsburgh International Airport, I peered out the window at the snow-covered landscape below. After a decade of desert deployments and foreign bases, the sight of American winter filled me with a sense of belonging. I was coming home not just to a country, but to a family, or so I thought. The first hint that things might not match my expectations came when I turned on my phone after landing. No messages asking about my flight status. No missed calls checking if I needed anything. I brushed aside the disappointment and called my mother. "I've landed," I said. When she answered, "Oh, that's today," her voice held none of the excitement I had expected. "Well, we're all busy with Christmas preparations. Can you get a cab?" The cab ride from the airport to our suburban neighborhood cost nearly $80, a significant expense given my uncertain financial future. As we pulled up to the two-story house where I had grown up, I noticed the elaborate Christmas decorations adorning the front yard, light-up reindeer, inflatable Santa Clauses, and strings of multicolored lights outlining every window. My mother had always loved making a display for the neighbors to admire. I paid the driver and awkwardly maneuvered my duffel bag while balancing on my cane. No one came out to help as I made my slow way up the icy walkway. By the time I reached the front door, sweat had soaked through my shirt, despite the December chill, and the pain in my leg had intensified to a burning throb. I raised my hand to knock but hesitated. This was my childhood home. Should I just walk in before I could decide? The door swung open and there stood my mother looking annoyed. "Were you just gonna stand there all day? You're letting all the heat out." And just like that, I knew nothing had changed. If anything, it had gotten worse. The house smelled like pine needles and cinnamon, a combination that had always signified Christmas. Throughout my childhood, a massive tree dominated the living room, decorated with a collection of ornaments my mother had carefully curated over decades. Some were family heirlooms passed down from her own mother. Others were expensive collectibles she purchased each year to keep up with the latest holiday trends. "You can put your things in your old room," she said, already turning away. "We converted it to a home office, but Tyler set up an air mattress for you." I stood in the entryway leaning heavily on my cane, trying to reconcile this cold reception with the nurturing voice I had heard on the phone during my hospital stay. Before I could respond, my sister Vanessa emerged from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a festive apron. "Krista, you made it." Her enthusiasm seemed genuine as she approached for a hug, then hesitated, eyeing my cane. "Can I hug you? I don't want to hurt you." "A hug would be nice," I said, realizing how long it had been since anyone had offered me physical affection. The embrace was brief but warm, a small comfort in the increasingly chilly atmosphere of my homecoming. "Vanessa, the pie needs checking," my mother called from the kitchen. My sister gave me an apologetic smile and hurried away. Alone again, I made my painful way up the stairs to what had once been my bedroom. True to my mother's word, it had been converted to a home office with a desk, computer, and filing cabinets. An air mattress had been half inflated in the corner, a thin blanket and flat pillow tossed on top. There was no evidence that I had ever lived in this space. No photographs, no remnants of the pale blue paint I had chosen as a teenager, no marks on the door frame tracking my childhood growth. I set down my bag and lowered myself carefully onto the air mattress, which sank nearly to the floor under my weight. 10 years of service, thousands of dollars sent home, and this was my welcome. I allowed myself a moment of self-pity before straightening my spine. Maybe they just needed time to adjust to my presence. Maybe once the initial awkwardness passed, the warmth would come by evening. The house had filled with extended family, my Aunt Susan and her husband Frank, my cousins Jennifer and Peter with their spouses, and my brother Tyler, who arrived last with a bottle of expensive wine, and no acknowledgement of my presence. The gathering was loud and festive, with everyone talking over each other about jobs and vacations, and the children who had been left with babysitters for the adult-only celebration. I sat quietly in a corner of the living room, The constant pain, making it difficult to engage in the rapid-fire conversations happening around me occasionally. Someone would glance my way with a mixture of curiosity and discomfort, but few made the effort to speak directly to me. It was as if my injury had rendered me invisible, or perhaps worse, had transformed me into a reminder of unpleasant realities that had no place at a Christmas gathering. Aunt Susan finally approached, wine glass in hand. "So you got hurt over there, huh?" she asked, gesturing vaguely toward my leg. "Yes, an explosion. Shrapnel damage and nerve injury," I explained, grateful for the acknowledgement despite her clear discomfort. "Well, at least you're home now," she said brightly, "and the military takes care of their own right. I'm sure they set you up with good benefits." Before I could explain the complicated reality of veteran benefits and the battles that often accompanied them, my mother called everyone to the dining room for dinner. The table was a masterpiece of holiday perfection. Fine china that only appeared on special occasions, crystal glasses that had belonged to my grandmother, and an elaborate centerpiece of poinsettias and glittering ornaments. The food matched the presentation. A golden turkey cranberry sauce molded into perfect circles, and side dishes arranged with artistic precision. "Krista, you can sit at the end next to the wall," my mother instructed, pointing to a chair that had been awkwardly wedged into a space, clearly not intended for a table setting. "That way your equipment won't be in the way." By equipment she meant my cane, which I needed to keep close for stability. I made my way to the assigned seat, aware of the stairs following my labored movements. The chair was pushed so close to the wall that I had to sit sideways, my injured leg extended into what little space remained. The dinner began with a prayer LED by Uncle Frank, thanking God for family health and prosperity. No mention was made of military service or sacrifice. As dishes were passed around the table, conversations resumed, focusing on neighborhood gossip and workplace achievements. "Jennifer just got promoted to senior manager," Aunt Susan announced proudly. "Youngest in company history." And Peter closed that big account he was telling us about at Thanksgiving, Uncle Frank added. "Commission was enough to put a down payment on a boat." My mother beamed at, "My cousins always knew you two would do well for yourselves." Got the family ambition, the implication hung in the air. And like me, who had wasted 10 years in the military, I swallowed my hurt, along with a bite of dry turkey, and tried to join the conversation. "The unit I served with did some amazing work, rebuilding schools in Krista." "Could you pass the gravy?" my brother interrupted, not bothering to make eye contact. The pattern continued throughout the meal. Each time I tried to speak about my experiences, or even respond to a direct question, someone would talk over me or change the subject. My mother, at the head of the table, orchestrated this subtle exclusion with the skill of a conductor, directing attention away from me with pointed questions to others. The breaking point came during dessert. My mother had brought out her special Christmas pudding, served on the antique dessert plates that had belonged to her grandmother. As she handed me my portion, her expression made it clear that she expected me to recognize the honor she was bestowing by allowing me to use the precious family heirloom. I accepted the plate with a murmured thanks, but as I shifted in my uncomfortable chair, my injured leg seized with a spasm of pain. My hand jerked, and the plate slipped from my fingers, crashing to the hardwood floor, where it shattered into dozens of pieces. The silence that followed was absolute. "I'm so sorry," I began, already reaching for my cane to help me get down and clean up the mess. My mother's face had transformed into a mask of cold fury. "Do you have any idea what you just did?" Her voice was quiet but vibrating with rage. "That plate survived 2 world wars, and you couldn't manage to hold on to it for 5 minutes. It was an accident," I said, my voice small. "My leg, your leg. Your pain, your service." She spat the words like they were poison. "That's all we've heard about 4 months. Do you think you're the only person with problems? While you were playing soldier, I was here dealing with real life. Real bills. Real responsibilities." I stared at her in shock. "Playing soldier? Mom, I nearly died. And I sent you thousands of dollars over the years. Money that could have. Money that barely covered what it cost to maintain this house, to keep up appearances in this neighborhood." She cut me off. "And now you come back. expecting us to wait on you hand and foot to rearrange our lives around your disability. The room was frozen, everyone watching the confrontation with a mixture of discomfort and morbid fascination. I never expected that, I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. I just thought you thought what? That we'd be your nursemates, that we'd convert the house into a hospital ward. My mother stood now, looking down at me with contempt. Look at you, you can barely feed yourself. You're a burden, Krista. A burden I never asked for. The words hit me like physical blows. I had spent 10 years convincing myself that my sacrifices were building a foundation of love and respect. In one moment, that foundation crumbled to dust. If that's how you feel, I said, struggling to my feet, then I'll go. Best idea you've had since you got here, my mother replied coldly. Get out of this house. Go find somewhere your brokenness won't ruin everyone else's holiday. No one spoke up, not Tyler, not Vanessa, not any of the relatives who had benefited from the money I had faithfully sent home. They sat in uncomfortable silence, eyes averted as I gathered my dignity along with my cane and limped toward the stairs to collect my few belongings. As I painfully made my way up the steps, I heard the conversation resume behind me, as if a brief unpleasantness had been dealt with, and now the celebration could continue uninterrupted. By the time I came back downstairs with my duffel bag, the broken plate had been swept away and a fresh dessert had been served. No one looked up as I let myself out the front door and into the cold Christmas night. The winter air hit my face like a slap, shocking me out of the numb disbelief that had carried me out of the house. Reality crashed in as I stood on the front porch, duffel bag at my feet, cane clutched in my trembling hand. It was past 9 at night on Christmas Day. I was injured and alone, and I had nowhere to go. For a moment I considered knocking on the door and apologizing, swallowing my pride along with the injustice of it all. But even as the thought formed, I heard laughter from inside, the celebration continuing without a hitch in my absence. The message was clear: I was not missed. With painful slowness, I made my way down the icy walkway to the street. The nearest hotel was miles away, an impossible journey on foot in my condition. I pulled out my phone, checking my bank balance before calling a cab. The numbers on the screen made my stomach clench. After paying for the cab from the airport, and with no final paycheck yet processed from my medical discharge, I had less than $200 to my name. As I stood there, a car slowed in front of the house. The window rolled down, revealing an elderly man peering out at me with concern. You all right there, miss? Need some help with your bag? Under normal circumstances, I would have politely declined. The Army had taught me self-reliance and caution around strangers. But these were not normal circumstances. Actually, I said, my voice catching, I could use a ride to the bus station if it's not too much trouble. The man, who introduced himself as George, insisted it was no trouble at all. My wife passed last year, he explained, as he carefully loaded my bag into his trunk. Driving around on Christmas night keeps me from sitting alone with the memories. As we drove through the decorated neighborhoods, George shared stories about his 50-year marriage and asked gentle questions about my service. Unlike my family, he listened when I spoke, expressing genuine gratitude for my sacrifice. By the time we reached the bus station, I felt something I hadn't felt since landing on American soil. Respected. Where are you headed? George asked as he helped me out of the car. I hesitated before answering. My grandmother's farm. It's about 2 hours from here. Well, I hope you're welcome. There is warmer than whatever sent you out on Christmas night, he said, genuine concern in his eyes. He refused my offer of money for the ride, instead pressing $20 into my hand for the bus ticket. Merry Christmas, soldier. I watched him drive away, a knot in my throat. A stranger had shown me more kindness in 20 minutes than my family had in my entire homecoming. Inside the station, I discovered that the last bus, heading in the direction of my grandmother's farm, would leave in 15 minutes. It wouldn't take me all the way there, only to the small town about 5 miles from her property, but it was the best option I had. I purchased the ticket, using George's $20 and some of my dwindling funds. The bus was nearly empty, just a handful of other travelers with their own stories of why they were journeying on Christmas night. I found a seat near the back where I could stretch my injured leg into the aisle and settled in for the ride, my cane propped beside me like a silent companion. As the bus pulled away from the station, the events of the day replayed in my mind. The coldness of my reception, the converted bedroom, the uncomfortable dinner, the shattered plate, my mother's cruel words. "You're a burden." After everything I had given, everything I had sacrificed, this was what waited for me at home. The contrast with my military experience couldn't have been more stark. In the Army, I had found the family I had always craved. My unit members had become brothers and sisters who would literally take a bullet for each other. We shared food stories, fears and dreams when one of us succeeded. We all celebrated when one of us struggled. We all provided support. I thought about Santos, so young and eager to serve, now buried in Arlington. I thought about Captain Rodriguez, who had visited me every day in the hospital until her own deployment. I thought about Specialist Wilson, who had lost both legs in a previous explosion and had video called me from his prosthetics, fitting to show me that life continued after injury. They were my real family. And now I was separated from them by distance and circumstance, cast out by the biological family that had never truly accepted me. The landscape outside the window transformed as we left the suburbs behind, first giving way to highway emptiness, then to the rolling farmlands of western Pennsylvania. Even in the darkness, illuminated only by the occasional passing car or farmhouse light, I recognized this terrain. It was the landscape of my happiest childhood memories, all centered around visits to my grandmother's farm. I realized I hadn't called ahead to tell her I was coming. It was now past 10:30, likely well after she would have gone to bed. I pulled out my phone, but the battery was nearly dead, and I had left my charger plugged in beside the air mattress. In my hurry to leave, I managed to dial her number before the phone died completely, but the call went straight to voicemail. Anxiety gnawed at me as the miles passed. What if she wasn't home? What if she was traveling for the holidays? What if, like my mother, she saw me as nothing but a burden? No, I couldn't believe that. Eleanor had always been my safe harbor, the one person who loved me unconditionally. She would welcome me, she had to. The bus arrived at the small town station just before midnight. As the driver announced our location, I gathered my belongings and made my slow way to the front. "Merry Christmas," the driver said, as I carefully navigated the steps down to the sidewalk. "You got someone meeting you." "Number," I admitted. "I need to get to a farm about 5 miles north of here." He frowned. "Not much in the way of taxis in this town, especially this time of night and in your condition." I nodded, already aware of the problem. 5 miles might as well have been 50 given my injury and the hour wait here, the driver said, before walking across the street to a small convenience store, the only business still open this late on Christmas. He returned minutes later with an older man in tow. "This is Harold," the driver explained. "Owns the store. He says he's heading that direction. After he closes up in about 15 minutes. Can give you a ride if you're willing to wait." Relief flooded through me. "Thank you," I said to both men, fighting back tears. "I can wait." Harold proved to be another unexpected angel on this strangest of Christmas nights. After closing his store, he helped me into his pickup truck and listened attentively as I gave directions to my grandmother's farm. Like George, he asked about my service with genuine interest, sharing that his own son was currently deployed with the Navy. "Must be hard coming home to a country that doesn't understand what you've been through," he observed as we turned onto the rural route that would lead to my grandmother's property. "Harder coming home to a family that doesn't want to understand," I replied, the words slipping out before I could censor them. Harold just nodded wisdom in his silence. The truck's headlights illuminated the familiar sign at the entrance to my grandmother's long driveway, Eleanor's Orchard and Farm. Below it, a smaller sign that had been there since my childhood. "All are welcome here," I prayed. That included me. The farmhouse stood silhouetted against the night sky, a 2-story structure that had weathered nearly a century of seasons. A single light glowed from the kitchen window, a beacon of hope that propelled me forward, despite my exhaustion and pain. Want me to wait until you're inside?" Harold asked as he helped me out of the truck. "No thank you. You've done more than enough," I assured him, though uncertainty churned in my stomach. "My grandmother and I are close. She'd be glad to see me," with a final wave. Harold drove away, his taillights disappearing down the dark country road. I stood alone at the end of the walkway, gathering my courage before beginning the slow journey to the front porch. Each step with my cane on the gravel path sent jolts of pain through my damaged nerves. But I pressed on, focused on the light from the window. The 3 steps up to the porch might as well have been a mountain. By the time I reached the front door, sweat had soaked through my shirt despite the December chill, and my breathing came in short, pain gasps. I leaned heavily against the door frame, trying to compose myself before knocking. What would I say? How would I explain showing up unannounced near midnight on Christmas? The truth seemed too painful to articulate, even to the one person who had always accepted me unconditionally. Before I could decide, my hand rose almost of its own accord and knocked on the weathered wooden door. The sound seemed impossibly loud in the quiet night. Long moments passed. I knocked again, louder this time, fear rising that the light I had seen was simply left on by accident, that the house was empty, that this final hope would prove as hollow as all the others. Then came the sound of movement inside, a chair scraping, footsteps approaching. The porch light flickered on, momentarily blinding me when my vision cleared. The door had opened to reveal my grandmother. Eleanor looked older than I remembered her, once auburn hair now completely silver, new lines etched around her eyes and mouth. She wore a faded robe over flannel pajamas, reading glasses perched on her nose. Her expression as she took in my appearance, the cane, the duffel bag, the obvious distress, shifted from surprise to something I couldn't read. "Grandma," I began, my voice breaking, "I'm sorry to show up like this." She held up a hand, stopping my words. Her face hardened in a way I had never seen before, and when she spoke, her voice was cold and distant. "Your mother called, go away." The words hit me like a physical blow. I staggered back, nearly losing my balance, the last fragments of my heart shattering into dust. The one person I had counted on, the one relationship I had believed was genuine and unconditional, had just rejected me as thoroughly as my mother had. I couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. I couldn't process this final betrayal. Tears streamed down my face as I stood swaying on her porch, utterly broken, and then in an instant, everything changed. Eleanor's heart expression melted away, replaced by alarm and then fierce love. She lunged forward, catching me by the arms before I could fall. "Krista, oh my God, I'm so sorry. It was a test. I needed to see your face," she said urgently, pulling me into an embrace. "Your mother called hours ago with some ridiculous story about you having a mental breakdown, becoming violent, stealing from her. I knew it was lies, but I needed to see for myself what had happened." The relief was so overwhelming that my legs gave way entirely. Eleanor, surprisingly strong for her age, supported me as she helped me inside, kicking the door closed behind us. "What did she do to you?" she demanded as she lowered me onto the worn sofa in her living room. "Tell me everything." Through tears and exhaustion, I recounted the events of the day. The cold welcome, the converted bedroom, the disastrous dinner, and finally my mother's cruel dismissal. Eleanor listened without interrupting, her expression growing increasingly thunderous. "That woman," she said, when I had finished, her voice shaking with fury. "My own daughter. I have never been so ashamed in all my life." She disappeared briefly into the kitchen, returning with a glass of water and 2 pills for the pain. She explained, correctly reading the tension in my body. "Then we'll get you settled in a proper bed. Everything else can wait until morning." As I swallowed the medication, Eleanor sat beside me, taking my hands in hers. "Krista, listen to me. You are not a burden. You are a hero, not just for your military service, but for your kindness and your strength. This is your home for as long as you want or need it to be." She said, "No one wanted me." I whispered, the pain of the words still fresh. She was wrong. Eleanor said firmly, "I want you here. I have missed you every day for 10 years. Having you home even under these circumstances is the best Christmas gift I could receive." She helped me to the guest room, which I realized had been kept ready for me all this time, unlike the makeshift accommodation at my mother's house. This room held evidence of belonging, photographs of me in uniform displayed proudly on the dresser, a handmade quilt in my favorite colors on the bed, even a few books I had loved as a teenager still on the shelf. "You kept all this for me?" I asked, overwhelmed by this tangible proof of love. "Of course I did," Eleanor replied simply. "This has always been your home too." As she helped me into bed, mindful of my injured leg, Eleanor hummed the same lullaby she had sung to me as a child. The familiar melody combined with the pain medication and emotional exhaustion pulled me towards sleep. Just before consciousness faded, I felt her gentle hand brush hair from my forehead. "Rest now," she whispered. "You're safe, you're home." And for the first time since returning to American soil, I truly was. The first rays of winter sunlight filtering through the curtains woke me the next morning. For a disorienting moment, I couldn't remember where I was. The comfortable bed, the warm quilt, the familiar smell of freshly baked bread, all seemed like elements of a dream after the nightmare of the previous day. Then the pain in my leg reasserted itself, a harsh reminder of reality. I was at my grandmother's farm. I had been rejected by my mother and the rest of my family. I was injured, unemployed, and essentially homeless, except for the sanctuary Eleanor had offered. A soft knock at the door preceded my grandmother's entrance. She carried a tray with breakfast and a steaming mug of coffee. "How are you feeling this morning?" she asked, setting the tray on the bedside table. Physically or emotionally, I attempted a smile that probably looked more like a grimace. "Both, I expect." "Are pretty rough," she said, sitting carefully on the edge of the bed. "But we're going to work on healing both one day at a time." Over breakfast, Eleanor encouraged me to talk through what had happened. Not just at Christmas dinner, but throughout my years of military service. Unlike my family, who had shown no interest in my experiences, she listened intently, asking thoughtful questions and expressing appropriate outrage at the dangers I had faced and pride in the service I had provided. "You know," she said as she collected the breakfast dishes, "your mother has always been self-centered. Even as a child, I tried to teach her empathy. But some people are simply incapable of seeing beyond their own needs and wants. I kept thinking if I just did enough, gave enough, she would finally love me the way I needed." I admitted, Eleanor's eyes filled with compassion. "That was never going to happen, Krista. Not because you weren't worthy of that love, but because she isn't capable of giving it." In the days that followed, Eleanor helped me begin to process not just the recent rejection, but the lifetime of conditional love that had shaped my choices. She brought down boxes of letters I had sent her from overseas, showing me how she had cherished every word, every photograph, every scrap of connection during my years away. "I read each one at least a dozen times," she told me, "and I showed them to everyone who would stand still long enough to listen. The church group probably knew more about your deployments than your own unit did." Then came a revelation that initially filled me with rage, before giving way to a sad understanding. Eleanor had kept careful track of the money I had sent home over the years, concerned about the increasing amounts. "I confronted your mother about it," she said as we sat at her kitchen table, a spread of financial records between us. "I knew what your military salary would be, and the amounts you were sending home seemed excessive." She assured me you were fine, that you had plenty left for yourself. The truth, as we pieced together, was that very little of the money I had sent had gone toward actual household expenses. My mother had used it for luxury purchases, vacations, and maintaining appearances in the neighborhood. The new roof I had funded had never been replaced. The college expenses for Vanessa had been covered by scholarships and student loans, not my contributions. "She was using you," Eleanor said plainly. "And I'm partly to blame for not stepping in sooner." "You couldn't have known," I assured her, though the knowledge that my sacrifices had been exploited added another layer to the betrayal. After the first week, Eleanor insisted on taking me to see her personal physician, Dr. Martin, concerned that my leg wasn't receiving proper care. The local doctor was a kind, elderly man who had known Eleanor for decades. The military docs did a decent job with the initial repairs, he said after examining my injuries. But your physical therapy plan is outdated, and these pain medications they've got you on are too strong for long-term use. With Dr. Martin's help, we developed a new recovery plan. He referred me to a physical therapist in town who specialized in nerve injuries and helped me transition to pain management techniques that wouldn't leave me foggy and dependent. January brought heavy snow to the farm, transforming the landscape into a winter wonderland that was beautiful to look at, but made mobility even more challenging. Eleanor's community stepped up in ways that continuously surprised me. Her church friends brought meals and offered rides to my therapy appointments. Her neighbors' teenage sons showed up to shovel paths through the snow so I could practice walking with my cane on stable ground. Most surprising was the discovery that Eleanor had been talking about her brave granddaughter for years. People I had never met greeted me by name, sharing stories. Eleanor had told them about my service and achievements. "You've been bragging about me," I asked her one evening as we sat by the fireplace after another day of visitors. "Of course I have," she replied. "I've always been tremendously proud of you." As winter gave way to early spring, I began to find purpose in helping around the farm in ways that accommodated my physical limitations. I couldn't lift heavy equipment or climb ladders to prune trees in the orchard, but I could manage the farm's accounting, update the ancient computer system Eleanor had been using, and even handle some of the lighter animal care. The physical work combined with regular therapy sessions gradually improved my mobility. The pain remained a constant companion, but its intensity lessened, and I learned techniques to manage the worst flare without resorting to the strong medications that dulled both the pain and my mind. More important than the physical healing was the emotional transformation. Under Eleanor's patient guidance, I began to recognize the patterns of seeking approval that had dominated my life. I saw how my determination to earn my mother's love had shaped my decisions from joining the military to sending money I couldn't afford to part with. "Love that has to be earned isn't really love at all," Eleanor told me as we planted early spring vegetables in her greenhouse. "It's a transaction. And you deserve better than transactions. You deserve unconditional acceptance." When the snow finally melted and the first green shoots appeared in the orchard, I made a decision that would have been unthinkable months earlier. I would stay at the farm permanently. The realization came gradually, emerging from countless small moments of peace and belonging I found in the daily rhythms of farm life. "Are you sure?" Eleanor asked when I broached the subject. "This is a quiet life very different from what you've known. And you're young with so many possibilities still ahead." "I'm sure," I told her for the first time. "I'm making a choice based on what brings me joy and peace, not on what might earn someone's approval." The decision made, we began to adapt to accommodate my permanent residence and ongoing recovery. Eleanor converted a ground floor study into a bedroom, for me eliminating the need to navigate stairs on bad pain days. We installed handrails in strategic locations and rearranged the barn to ensure I could participate in farm operations without exacerbating my injuries. In late March, my sister Vanessa called. It was the first contact from any family member since Christmas night. "I've been wanting to call," she began hesitantly. "What happened at Christmas was wrong. The way Mom treated you, the things she said. None of us should have stayed silent." "But you did," I replied, not accusingly but stating a simple fact. "Yes," she acknowledged, "we did." I don't have an excuse, only an explanation. Mom has always controlled the narrative, and we've always followed her lead. It was easier than standing up to her. The conversation was difficult but necessary. Vanessa didn't ask for forgiveness, which I appreciated. Some wounds were too fresh for easy reconciliation. But she did ask if we could begin rebuilding our relationship, sister to sister, separate from our mother's influence. "I'd like to try," I told her honestly. But slowly my brother Tyler, in contrast, remained firmly under my mother's sway. His one call came in April, focused not on apology but on money. "Mom says you still have access to the family account," he said without preamble. "She needs you to transfer your disability back pay when it comes through. The old Krista might have agreed. might have seen this as another opportunity to buy the approval. I had always craved the new Krista. Strengthened by months of healing and Eleanor's wisdom, recognized the manipulation for what it was. "No, Tyler," I said calmly, "that's not going to happen. My disability pay is to support me as I build a new life. After everything Mom has done for you," he demanded, his tone incredulous. "What exactly has she done for me, Tyler?" I'm genuinely asking. His silence was answer enough. With Eleanor's encouragement, I took legal steps to protect myself financially. I consulted with a veterans advocate who helped me navigate the complex system of benefits and ensured that my mother could not access any of my military, pension, or disability payments. I closed joint accounts, removed her as a beneficiary in my policies, and established clear boundaries around financial support. "Your resources are limited," Eleanor reminded me when I felt guilty about these measures. "You need to secure your own future." By the time summer arrived, bringing with it the busy season of the farm, I had established a new rhythm of life. My days were structured around physical therapy exercises, farm tasks adapted to my abilities, and online courses I had enrolled in. Using my military education benefits, I was studying agricultural business management, combining my military leadership experience with my newfound love of farming. The transformation wasn't just in my daily activities, but in my entire approach to life. For the first time, I was making choices based on what brought me fulfillment, rather than what might earn approval from others. I was learning to accept help without seeing it as weakness, to set boundaries without guilt, and most importantly, to recognize my own worth, independent of what I could do for others. "You stand taller now," Eleanor observed one evening as we sat on the porch, watching fireflies rise from the fields. Not just physically, I knew what she meant. Despite the permanent limp, despite the cane I would likely need for the rest of my life, I carried myself with a new confidence. The burden I had shed was not my injury, but the crushing weight of seeking validation from someone incapable of giving it. "I feel taller." One agreed, "Lighter too." Eleanor smiled, reaching over to squeeze my hand. "That's what happens when you stop carrying other people's expectations and start honoring your own truth." 1 year after that fateful Christmas night, the farm had transformed almost as much as I had. What had once been Eleanor's retirement project had evolved into a true family business, with upgrades and expansions that reflected both her vision and my contribution. The orchard now featured wider paths to accommodate my mobility needs, which had the added benefit of making it more accessible to elderly visitors and families with strollers. We had converted one of the outbuildings into a small farm store where we sold apple products, honey from our new beehives, and seasonal vegetables. My physical recovery had plateaued, as Dr. Martin had warned it might. The nerve damage was permanent, leaving me with chronic pain and limited mobility in my right leg. The cane remained a constant companion, and some days were still difficult enough to require the wheelchair we kept for emergencies, but I had learned to adapt, to pace myself, and to accept these limitations without seeing them as failures. More important than the physical adaptation was the emotional and intellectual growth. Using my military education benefits, I had completed online courses in sustainable agriculture, business management, and web design. The farm now had a website and social media presence that had expanded our customer base beyond the local community. I had also found purpose in veteran support work, starting a small program that brought former service members to the farm for day visits. Many of them, like me, struggled with the transition to civilian life and found peace in the rhythms of farm work and the acceptance of our little community. Eleanor, now in her late 70s, had embraced these changes with characteristic enthusiasm. "The farm has never been so alive," she often said, watching visitors explore the orchards or participate in seasonal activities. My relationship with Vanessa had cautiously improved. She had visited twice, awkward at first, but gradually warming to the new life I had built. She brought her children, my niece and nephew, who delighted in collecting eggs from the hen house and feeding the goats we had added to the farm's animal population. Tyler remained distant, still firmly in my mother's orbit. I had made peace with that distance, understanding that some relationships could not be forced into health. As for my mother, I had neither seen nor spoken to her since that Christmas night. Through Vanessa, I heard occasional updates. She had remodeled the house again, joined a new social club, taken a Mediterranean cruise. Her life continued unchanged by my absence, which was perhaps the most telling evidence that cutting ties had been the right decision. Or so I thought, until an unseasonably warm day in early December, when a familiar car pulled into the farm's driveway. I was in the farm store, helping a customer select apple varieties for a holiday pie, when I saw her through the window. Diane, immaculately dressed, as always, stepping out of her luxury sedan and surveying the farm with an expression of thinly veiled disdain. Eleanor, who had been restocking shelves nearby, followed my gaze. "Do you want me to send her away?" she asked quietly. I considered it a year ago. I might have hid and might have sought Eleanor's protection from the emotional storm my mother invariably brought with her, but I was different now. No. I said, "I can handle this." I finished with the customer, then made my way outside, conscious of my uneven gait, but no longer embarrassed by it. My mother watched my approach, her eyes flicking to the cane and away again, as if the evidence of my injury was distasteful. "Hello, Mom," I said when I reached her, my voice steady. "This is a surprise, Krista." She acknowledged with a nod. "You look healthy." "I am." "Thank you." "What brings you here?" She glanced around at the farm, at the customers coming and going from the store, at the new sign advertising our products. "I was in the area," she said, a clear lie given that the farm was nowhere near any destination she would normally frequent. Though I would stop by, I waited, knowing from long experience that my mother never stopped by without a purpose. "Your disability back pay came through," she said finally. "Tyler mentioned you were unreasonable about sharing it." And there it was, after a year of no contact. Number apology for her cruel words, no acknowledgement of her rejection. She had come for money in the past. I might have given in, might have seen this as an opportunity to buy my way back into her good graces, might have convinced myself that financial support was the same as love. But now I saw the transaction for what it was: emotional extortion dressed up as family obligation. My disability pay is being used to support my life here and my future, I said calmly. "I won't be sharing it." Her face hardened, the mask of maternal concern dropping away. "After everything I've done for you, I raised you, I gave you a home, I supported your decision to join the military. Did you?" I asked, genuinely curious about her version of our shared history. "I remember sending money home for 10 years. I remember calling and writing with barely any response. I remember coming home injured and being called a burden before being thrown out on Christmas night." "You're exaggerating," she scoffed. "You were emotional and difficult. Your injury had clearly affected your judgment." I felt a familiar tightness in my chest, the old pattern of doubt and guilt rising up, but alongside it came something new: clarity. "Mom," I said gently, "I don't expect you to understand or acknowledge what happened. I've accepted that our relationship will never be what I hoped for. But I want you to know that I'm happy here. I've found purpose and peace. And I've learned that I don't need to buy your approval anymore." She stared at me, clearly unprepared for this calm resistance. "Your grandmother has poisoned you against me," she accused. "No," I corrected her. "Grandma has simply loved me unconditionally. She's shown me what real family support looks like." At that moment, Eleanor emerged from the farm store. She walked slowly toward us, her expression cautious but determined. "Diane," she said, acknowledging her daughter with a nod, "if you've come to make amends with Krista, you're welcome to stay for tea. If you've come for any other reason, I think it's best you leave now." My mother looked between us, calculation visible in her eyes. When she realized neither of us would bend, she straightened her shoulders. "I can see I'm wasting my time here," she said coldly. "When you come to your senses, Krista, you know where to find me." Without another word, she returned to her car and drove away, Rebel spinning under her tires. I watched until the car disappeared down the long driveway, surprised by the absence of pain her departure left. Where once there would have been devastation, now there was only a quiet relief. Eleanor placed a gentle hand on my shoulder. "You okay?" "Yes," I said, realizing it was true. "Actually, I'm better than okay." That evening, as we sat on the porch, watching the sunset paint the winter sky in shades of pink and gold, Eleanor and I reflected on the year's journey. "You know," she said thoughtfully, "when you showed up on my doorstep last Christmas, I was terrified for you. You were so broken. Not just physically, but in spirit." I acknowledged. I had built my entire identity around earning love. That was never going to be freely given. And now I considered the question, looking out over the farm that had become my home and purpose. Now I understand that family isn't always blood. It's the people who stand by you when standing is all you can do. It's the people who see your value not in what you can give them, but in who you are. Eleanor smiled, the fading sunlight illuminating the wisdom in her aged face. "That's a lesson many people never learn. I had a good teacher," I told her, reaching over to squeeze her hand as darkness fell over the farm, bringing with it the promise of another day of purpose and peace. I reflected on how completely my life had changed in just 1 year. The injury that had seemed like the end of everything had become the beginning of a more authentic life. The rejection that had broken my heart had freed me to find connections based on genuine acceptance rather than obligation. My grandmother had shown me that love should lift you up, not wear you down. That boundaries were not selfish, but necessary for healthy relationships. That starting over wasn't failure, but sometimes the bravest choice you could make. Most importantly, she had taught that our worth isn't determined by others' treatment of us, but by the truth we carry within. That lesson, hard won through pain and healing, was the greatest gift I had ever received. As the first stars appeared in the winter sky, I felt a sense of completion. The journey wasn't over, the healing wasn't perfect, but I had found my way home in every sense that mattered. Have you ever wondered how different your life might be if you hadn't experienced rejection or hardship? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. If this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear that. Family is about connection, not just blood. Thank you for joining me on this journey of healing and discovery. Remember, sometimes the most painful endings lead to the most beautiful beginnings.